My name is Adriana, and I'm 32 years old. 7 years of marriage ended when Michael left me for Cassandra, his pharmaceutical sales rep mistress. I never expected to discover what I did about our daughter Emma. At his engagement party, I quietly placed the DNA test on the table. His face turned white as the truth exploded in front of everyone, a truth that would shatter the perfect life he thought he was building. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, hit that like and subscribe button. Now let me tell you how I went from heartbroken wife to the woman who took back her power. I met Michael during my sophomore year of college. I was studying elementary education and he was a pre-med student with dreams of becoming a surgeon. We met at the campus coffee shop where I worked part-time. He came in every Tuesday and Thursday before his organic chemistry lab, always ordering the same thing, a large black coffee and a blueberry muffin. One rainy Tuesday, he forgot his wallet. I covered his order, telling him he could pay me back next time. Instead, he returned that evening with dinner from my favorite Italian restaurant and a handwritten thank you note. That small gesture of thoughtfulness captured my heart immediately. Our relationship blossomed quickly. Michael was charming, intelligent, and ambitious. When we were together, it felt like we were the only two people in the world. He would study for hours in the library, and I would bring him snacks and coffee, quizzing him on medical terms I could barely pronounce. When I had late nights preparing lesson plans, he would surprise me with takeout and encourage me to take breaks. We balanced each other perfectly. After 3 years of dating, Michael proposed on graduation day. He got down on one knee in front of our families and friends, promising to love me forever. I said yes without hesitation. We were young, but I had no doubts that he was the one I wanted to spend my life with. Our wedding was small but beautiful. We couldn't afford anything extravagant. Michael was about to start medical school, and we were saving every penny. My mother sewed my wedding dress, a simple white A-line with delicate lace details. Michael's parents gifted us our honeymoon a week at a beachfront cottage in Maine. It was perfect in its simplicity. The early years of our marriage were challenging but fulfilling. We lived in a tiny one-bedroom apartment near the medical school. The heating barely worked in winter, and the neighbours argued loudly at all hours. But it was our first home together, and we made it cozy with second-hand furniture and photos of our families. While Michael attended classes and studied, I worked 2 jobs, teaching during the day at a local elementary school and waitressing at night. The hours were long, and sometimes I'd go days barely seeing my husband, but I never complained. I believed in Michael's dream, and I was proud to support him through his journey. We were building our future together, brick by brick. When Michael started his residency, things got even harder. He worked 80-hour weeks, coming home exhausted and often falling asleep before we could even talk about our days. I would leave little notes in his scrubs pocket, just to remind him that I was thinking of him. He would text me photos from the hospital cafeteria, always with the caption, "Not as good as your cooking." These small connections kept us going through the toughest times. After years of sacrifice and hard work, Michael finally became a full-fledged surgeon, specializing in cardiothoracic surgery. The day he received his first official paycheck as an attending physician, he came home with champagne and a set of keys. He had put a down payment on a beautiful house in one of the most desirable neighborhoods in town, a far cry from our drafty apartment. "You supported me through everything," he said, as we stood in the empty living room of our new home. "Now it's my turn to give you the life you deserve." The house was everything I'd ever dreamed of. 4 bedrooms, a spacious kitchen with granite countertops, a backyard with enough space for children to play. As we settled into our new home, we began talking about starting a family. We had postponed having children until Michael's career was established, and now the time felt right. Getting pregnant took longer than we expected. After a year of trying and several disappointing pregnancy tests, we consulted with a fertility specialist. Just as we were about to start treatments, I discovered I was pregnant naturally. Michael cried when I showed him the positive test, placing his hand on my still flat stomach with a look of wonder. Emma was born on a snowy January morning after 20 hours of labour. She was perfect, 7 pounds 4 ounces, with a head full of dark hair and bright blue eyes. Michael cut the umbilical cord with tears streaming down his face. Holding our daughter for the first time, I felt a completeness I had never experienced before. The next 5 years were a whirlwind of first steps, first words, preschool applications, and paediatrician visits. Michael was a devoted father despite his busy schedule. He would FaceTime Emma from the hospital to say goodnight when he was working late. On his days off, he would take her to the park or the zoo, returning with ice cream-stained clothes and stories of their adventures. We appeared to be the perfect family. Beautiful home, successful careers, healthy child, loving marriage. At least that's what I thought we had. The first signs were subtle. Michael started working later than usual. He missed family dinners more frequently. The texts and calls during the day became less frequent. When he was home, he was distant, constantly checking his phone and stepping out to take calls. I made excuses for him. His practice was growing. He had more responsibilities. The hospital was short-staffed. I convinced myself that this was just another phase in our marriage, like the grueling years of medical school and residency. We had weathered difficult times before, and we would weather this too. If only I had known then what was really happening. But sometimes ignorance truly is bliss, and I was blissfully unaware that my perfect life was about to completely fall apart. The first concrete evidence came in the form of a credit card statement. Michael had always handled our finances, but one day the bill arrived while he was at work, and I opened it. There were charges I didn't recognize, dinners at restaurants we had never visited together, a jewelry store purchase on a day. He'd told me he was at a medical conference, hotel rooms in our own city. My stomach churned as I stared at those transactions, but I still found ways to justify them. Perhaps he was planning a surprise for our upcoming anniversary. Maybe he was meeting with pharmaceutical reps or colleagues from other hospitals. I wanted so desperately to believe that there was an innocent explanation. Then came our 10th wedding anniversary. Michael had promised to take the day off so we could celebrate properly. I arranged for my sister to watch Emma made reservations at the restaurant where we'd had our first date and bought a new dress for the occasion. But at 6 o'clock, just as I was putting the finishing touches on my makeup, he called. "Emergency surgery," he explained, his voice clipped and professional. "A patient with an aortic dissection. I have to go in now, or they won't make it. I'm so sorry, Adriana. I'll make it up to you." I was disappointed but understanding. This was the life of a surgeon's wife. Patients came first, especially in life or death situations. I cancelled our reservations, changed into sweatpants, and spent the evening watching movies with Emma instead. The next morning, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. The woman on the other end introduced herself as Nancy, a nurse who worked with Michael. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said hesitantly, "but I thought you should know. Your husband wasn't in surgery last night. I saw him at Bellini's restaurant with a woman. They looked intimate. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I thanked Nancy mechanically and hung up, my mind racing. Maybe she was mistaken. Maybe it was a patient or colleague. Maybe. But deep down, I knew. All the signs had been there. The late nights, the emotional distance, the secretive phone calls. I just hadn't wanted to see them. For weeks, I lived in a state of painful uncertainty. I checked his phone when he was showering, but he had started keeping it locked. I drove by the hospital during his supposed late shifts, only to find his parking space empty. I even called his office once, and his secretary told me he had left early for the day, on a day he didn't come home until after midnight. Finally, I did something I never thought I would do. I hired a private investigator. It felt sordid and wrong, like something from a trashy television drama, but I needed to know the truth one way or another. 2 weeks later, the investigator delivered a manila envelope to my doorstep. Inside were dozens of photographs of Michael with a beautiful blonde woman, holding hands across restaurant tables, kissing outside a downtown apartment building, entering a jewelry store together. The timestamps matched days when he'd told me he was working. Her name was Cassandra Jenkins, the investigator informed me, a pharmaceutical sales representative who frequently visited Michael's hospital. They had been seeing each other for at least 6 months, possibly longer. That night, when Michael came home, I spread the photos across our kitchen table. He walked in, saw the evidence of his betrayal laid out before him, and froze. "I can explain," he began, but his voice trailed off. Because really, what explanation could there be? How long? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. Michael sank into a chair, suddenly looking older than his 37 years. 8 months, he admitted. It started at a medical conference in Chicago. "Do you love her?" The question burned my throat, but I had to ask it. He hesitated, and in that pause I heard the death knell of our marriage. "Yes," he finally said. "I didn't mean for it to happen, Adriana. But yes, I love her. And I want a divorce." The cruelty of those words nearly brought me to my knees. All those years of supporting him, believing in him, building a life with him, and he could discard me so easily for someone new. "What about Emma?" I asked, thinking of our daughter sleeping peacefully upstairs, unaware that her world was about to be shattered. Michael had the decency to look pained. "I'll always be her father. We'll work out custody arrangements. But Cassandra and we want to start fresh." "Start fresh," I repeated numbly, as if the last 10 years meant nothing. "You're an amazing woman and mother, Adriana," he said, as if that meaningless platitude could soften the blow. "But people change. I've outgrown this life. I've outgrown us. Outgrown us. Like we were a pair of shoes he'd worn too long. Like our marriage was a phase he'd moved past. Like I was something to be discarded when a newer, shinier option came along." Michael moved out that night, taking only a suitcase of clothes and personal items. He went straight to Cassandra's downtown apartment, not even bothering with the pretense of a separate living arrangement during our separation. Telling Emma was the hardest part. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that Daddy doesn't live here anymore, that he loves someone else now, that our family as she knew it was over? I did my best to shield her from the ugliest parts, simply telling her that Daddy and I had decided to live in different houses, but that we both still loved her very much. She cried, of course, asked questions I couldn't answer, begged for things to go back to normal. And each night for weeks, she would ask if tomorrow would be the day Daddy came home for good. Friends and family rallied around us. My sister Jessica stayed with us for 2 weeks, cooking meals and helping with Emma, while I moved through each day in a fog of grief and shock. Michael's parents, who had always treated me like a daughter, called to express their dismay at their son's behaviour. My colleagues covered my classes when I couldn't face the thought of teaching 33rd graders with a smile pasted on my face. Slowly, painfully, I began to adjust to my new reality. I was now a single mother. My husband had left me for another woman. The future I had planned was gone, and I needed to create a new one for Emma and myself. Little did I know that the worst shock was yet to come. 3 months after Michael left, I began organising our documents for the divorce proceedings. Our lawyers had recommended gathering all important paperwork, financial records, property deeds, and medical information for both us and Emma. I sat at our dining room table, the same one where I had confronted Michael with the photos of his betrayal, sorting through years of our life together. I came across Emma's medical file, which included her birth records and immunisation history. As I flipped through the pages, a detail caught my eye that I'd never noticed before. Emma's blood type was listed as AB positive. That seemed odd to me because I knew my blood type was A negative, and Michael's was O positive. I wasn't a medical professional, but something about this didn't add up. I vaguely remembered learning about blood type inheritance in high school biology. If Michael was O positive, could he father a child with AB blood? I pushed the thought aside initially. There must be a mistake in the records, I reasoned. Maybe the hospital had mixed up her blood type, or perhaps I was misremembering Michael's type. That evening, my sister Jessica came over for dinner. After Emma was tucked into bed, I mentioned the blood type discrepancy, casually expecting her to confirm my assumption that it was just a clerical error. Instead, Jessica's eyes widened. "Adriana," she said slowly, "that's not possible. If Michael is O and you're A, Emma can't be AB. That's genetically impossible." "What are you saying?" I asked, a chill running down my spine. Jessica hesitated. "I'm not saying anything for sure, but are you absolutely certain Michael is Emma's biological father?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "Of course he is," I exclaimed. "I've never been with anyone else during our marriage. Never." Jessica held up her hands defensively. I know. I'm not suggesting that, but maybe there was some kind of mix-up at the hospital. These things have happened before." I dismissed the idea as ridiculous. Babies getting switched at birth was the stuff of soap operas, not real life. But after Jessica left, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I opened my laptop and began researching blood type inheritance patterns. Everything I read confirmed what Jessica had suggested. If Michael truly had O-type blood and I had A, our child could only have A or O blood, never AB. It was a biological impossibility. My heart racing, I dug through our filing cabinet until I found Michael's life insurance paperwork, which listed his medical information. There it was, in black and white, blood type O positive. I spent the entire night reading medical journals and genetics websites until my eyes burned. There was no escaping the conclusion either I had been unfaithful, which I knew was not the case, or Emma was not Michael's biological daughter. The next morning, I called the hospital where Emma was born and requested all of her birth records, citing the upcoming custody arrangements as the reason. When the records arrived a week later, I pored over them with trembling hands. Buried in the paperwork was a notation I'd never seen before. On the day of Emma's birth, there had been a brief power outage in the hospital. The backup generators had kicked in immediately, but there had been some confusion in the nursery. A nurse had noted a potential mix-up with the identification bracelets of two baby girls born within hours of each other. A follow-up note indicated that the situation had been resolved, but there were no details about how this resolution was achieved. My mind reeled with the implications. Could Emma have been switched with another baby? Was the daughter I had raised for 5 years not biologically mine? Or was she my biological child, but not Michael's? The questions were too enormous, too devastating to contemplate. I needed answers, definitive ones. After a sleepless night, I made an appointment with a private genetic testing facility. The process was simple but emotionally wrenching. A cheek swab from Emma and myself sent off to a lab for analysis. Michael's DNA wasn't necessary. If Emma and I were not biologically related, it would confirm a hospital switch. The 2 weeks waiting for the results were the longest of my life. I went through the motions of daily life, taking Emma to kindergarten, teaching my class, preparing meals, but my mind was constantly spinning with possibilities and fears. Finally, the email arrived with the test results. My hands shook so badly I could barely click to open it. The report was clear. Emma and I shared DNA consistent with a mother-daughter relationship. She was definitely my biological child. But the report also confirmed what the blood types had suggested. Michael could not possibly be her biological father. I sat at my kitchen table, stunned by this information. How could this be? I had never been unfaithful to Michael, not once in our entire relationship. The only explanation was that something had happened at the hospital, something beyond a simple bracelet mix-up. I contacted the genetic testing company again, explaining the situation and asking for further guidance. They suggested that the most likely explanation was that Emma had been conceived with sperm from a different man during an in vitro fertilization process. But we had never done IVF. Emma had been conceived naturally after we had been trying for just over a year. There had to be another explanation. I returned to the hospital records, examining them more closely. The note about the power outage and ID bracelet confusion now seemed significant in a new way. What if there had been a mix-up, not of babies, but of something else? It was time to get professional help to unravel this mystery. I made an appointment with Andrew Harker, a lawyer who specialized in medical malpractice cases. His office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, warm and inviting rather than cold and intimidating, like most law firms. After I explained the situation, showing him the DNA results and hospital records, Andrew leaned back in his chair thoughtfully. "In my 20 years of practice, I've seen a few cases like this," he said. "Not many, but they do happen. Given the evidence you've presented and your certainty about your fidelity during your marriage, I think we need to investigate the possibility of a serious medical error." He explained that the most likely scenario, given the circumstances, was that there had been a mix-up during a medical procedure, not a baby switch, but possibly a sperm sample mix-up, or, more concerning, an actual switch of embryos or newborns. "With your permission, I'd like to petition the hospital for all records related to births on the day your daughter was born," Andrew said, "and we should also request any incident reports regarding that power outage mentioned in the notes." I gave him full authorization to proceed. While Andrew began his investigation, I struggled with whether to tell Michael about these discoveries. We were in the middle of divorce proceedings, and he was already fighting for reduced child support, arguing that his new life with Cassandra required significant financial adjustments. In the end, I decided to wait until we had more concrete information. This wasn't about revenge or leverage in our divorce. It was about understanding the truth about our daughter's origins. 2 weeks later, Andrew called with news that made my blood run cold. "Adriana, I've found something significant," he said. "There was another baby girl born at the hospital within hours of Emma. Her parents are Jorge and Maria Ramirez. Their daughter Sophia was born just 3 hours after Emma, and both babies were in the nursery during that power outage." "What are you saying?" I asked, though I already suspected. "I'm saying we need to contact the Ramirez family and suggest genetic testing. Based on the hospital records and your DNA results, I believe there's a strong possibility that Sophia Ramirez is Michael's biological daughter, and Emma is the biological daughter of Jorge Ramirez." The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. Somewhere out there was a little girl with Michael's DNA being raised by another family, and my precious Emma, the child I had carried and given birth to, was biologically linked to strangers. Andrew helped me compose a letter to the Ramirez family explaining the situation as delicately as possible and requesting a meeting. It took courage to mail that letter, knowing it could potentially upend another family's life the way mine had been upended. The Ramirezes responded within days, agreeing to meet at a neutral location, a private room at Andrew's law firm. Walking into that meeting was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Jorge and Maria Ramirez were clearly as anxious as I was. Jorge was tall with dark hair and warm brown eyes, while Maria was petite with a gentle smile. Photos of their daughter Sophia showed a beautiful girl with dark curls and a smile that looked startlingly like Michael's. We shared our stories cautiously at first, then with increasing openness as we realized we were all victims of the same unfortunate circumstance. The Ramirezes had never questioned Sophia's paternity. Jorge's family had several members with lighter coloring, so they hadn't been surprised by their daughter's appearance. After extensive discussion, we agreed to proceed with comprehensive DNA testing for all parties involved, including Michael, using a sample from his medical records, which Andrew had managed to obtain legally through the discovery process of our divorce. The results confirmed our suspicions. Sophia was the biological daughter of Michael and me. Emma was the biological daughter of Jorge and Maria. There had been a switch in the nursery during that power outage 5 years ago, a mistake that had gone undetected until now. The hospital administrators were defensive when confronted with this evidence, attempting to minimize the situation and pushing for confidentiality agreements. But with Andrew's help, both our families stood firm. This wasn't just about financial compensation, it was about accountability and preventing such mistakes in the future. As for the Ramirez family and me, we faced an impossible decision. Should we switch the children back, uproot them from the only families they had ever known? The very thought was unbearable. After many emotional conversations and consultations with child psychologists, we came to a decision that felt right for everyone. We would keep raising the daughters we had raised from birth, but we would integrate our families so both girls could know their biological parents as well. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was one centered on the children's well-being rather than biological technicalities. Through all of this, Michael remained completely uninvolved. When I tried to tell him about the discovery, he dismissed it as an attempt to manipulate the divorce proceedings. He was too wrapped up in his new life with Cassandra to engage with what he viewed as my desperate attempts to hold on to him. That's when I learned through Michael's mother that he and Cassandra were planning an extravagant engagement party barely 6 months after our separation. The divorce wasn't even finalized yet. Elizabeth, my mother-in-law, called me in tears. "I don't know what's happened to my son," she said. "The way he's behaving, it's like I don't even know him anymore. He's insisting we all attend this party and celebrate his new relationship as if 10 years of marriage to you meant nothing." She hesitated, then added, "He wants Emma there too. Says it's important that she bond with Cassandra since they'll be a family now." A cold anger settled in my chest, replacing the grief and confusion that had dominated for months. Michael still didn't know about the DNA test results or the hospital mix-up. He was planning his new life, casting me aside and assuming he would maintain his relationship with Emma, a child who, by cruel cosmic irony, wasn't biologically his. "Elizabeth," I said calmly, "I'd like to come to that party." She was surprised but pleased perhaps, thinking I wanted reconciliation. But reconciliation was the furthest thing from my mind. It was time for Michael to face the truth about the kind of man he had become and about the daughter he thought was his. The engagement party was scheduled for a Saturday evening at the Belmont, one of the most exclusive venues in the city. I spent the week preparing myself, emotionally rehearsing what I would say and how I would say it. This wasn't about revenge, I reminded myself. It was about truth, about clearing the air so we could all move forward, especially for Emma's sake. My sister Jessica helped me get ready the evening of the party. She had been my rock throughout this entire ordeal, and she understood exactly why I needed to do this. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, as she zipped up my dress, a sleek midnight blue sheath that made me look confident and composed. "There will be a lot of people there. It could get ugly." "I'm sure," I said, applying a final touch of lipstick. Michael has been living in a fantasy world pretending that his actions haven't had consequences. He's refused to listen in private. Maybe he'll listen when he has an audience. Jessica squeezed my shoulders supportively. "I'll be right there with you." I had arranged for Emma to stay with my parents that evening. The Ramirez family was also prepared. Jorge would come to the venue at a specified time, waiting outside until I texted him. When Jessica and I arrived at the Belmont, the celebration was already in full swing. Crystal chandeliers illuminated a room filled with elegant floral arrangements and champagne fountains. A string quartet played softly in one corner. It was exactly the kind of ostentatious display Michael had always claimed to despise during our marriage. Elizabeth spotted me immediately and hurried over, embracing me warmly. "Adriana, I'm so glad you came," she said, though her eyes betrayed her confusion. "Michael didn't tell me you were invited." "I'm sure it just slipped his mind," I said with a small smile. "Where is the happy couple?" Elizabeth gestured toward the center of the room where Michael stood with his arm around Cassandra. She was stunning in a fitted white dress, her blonde hair cascading in perfect waves down her back. The enormous diamond on her finger caught the light every time she moved her hand, which she did frequently and conspicuously. Michael saw me approaching and froze momentarily before recovering his composure. "Adriana," he said, his voice carefully neutral, "this is unexpected." "Congratulations to you both," I said pleasantly. "Your mother was kind enough to let me know about the celebration." Cassandra's smile was brittle as she looked me up and down. "How thoughtful of you to come, though I'm a little surprised you'd want to be here under the circumstances." "I wouldn't have missed it," I replied, maintaining my calm facade. "We're all adults here, aren't we? Besides, I've been meaning to talk to Michael about some important developments regarding Emma." Michael's expression darkened. "If this is about the custody arrangement now, is not the time or place." "Actually, it's something else entirely," I said. "But you're right. Let's enjoy the party first." I moved away, mingling with the guests, many of whom were mutual friends, who looked decidedly uncomfortable seeing me there. I accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and sipped it slowly, waiting for the right moment. It came sooner than I expected. Elizabeth clinked her glass to call for attention, and the room quieted as she prepared to make a toast. "As Michael's mother, it gives me great joy to see him embarking on this new chapter of his life," she began, though her smile seemed forced. "Family has always been the centerpiece of our lives, and while the circumstances of this new relationship are not what any of us might have expected, we welcome Cassandra with open arms." She raised her glass higher. "To Michael and Cassandra, and to the future grandchildren who will join our beautiful granddaughter Emma in our family circle." As applause rippled through the room, I set down my champagne glass and moved to stand beside Elizabeth. She looked at me in surprise, but stepped aside, perhaps assuming I wanted to add my own gracious congratulations. I took a deep breath and addressed the room. "I'd like to say a few words as well, if I may." The murmuring crowd fell silent, all eyes fixed on me with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "For those who don't know me, I'm Adriana Michael's wife of 10 years and the mother of his daughter Emma." I deliberately used the present tense for wife, since our divorce wasn't yet finalized. Or at least, that's what we all believed until recently. Michael stepped forward, his face tightening. "Adriana, this isn't appropriate," I continued as if he hadn't spoken. 3 months ago, Michael left our marriage to begin a new life with Cassandra. These things happen, and I've come to terms with it. But in preparing for our divorce, I discovered something that changes everything. From my clutch purse, I withdrew a sealed envelope, the DNA test results that confirmed Emma was not Michael's biological daughter. I placed it deliberately on the gift table, which was piled high with expensive presents for the newly engaged couple. "It turns out, Michael, that Emma is not biologically your daughter." Gasps rippled through the room. Michael's face drained of colour. "What the hell are you talking about, if this is some kind of sick joke?" "It's not a joke," I said evenly. "There was a mix-up at the hospital when Emma was born. The power went out briefly and 2 baby girls had their identification bracelets confused. Emma is biologically the daughter of Jorge and Maria Ramirez, whose daughter Sophia is actually our biological child." Michael lunged forward, grabbing the envelope and tearing it open. His hands shook as he scanned the documents inside, his expression shifting from anger to disbelief to shock. "This can't be right," he muttered, but I could see in his eyes that he recognized the legitimacy of the test results. Cassandra pushed forward, peering at the papers over Michael's shoulder. "What does this mean?" she demanded, looking between Michael and me. "It means," I said calmly, "that the child Michael has been fighting for reduced custody of is not biologically his. The child he was planning to introduce you as a stepmother to shares no genetic material with him whatsoever." Michael's mother let out a small cry, reaching for the test results. "But Emma, she's still my granddaughter. We've loved her for 5 years. Of course she is," I assured her gently. Biology doesn't change that, but I thought everyone should know the truth before new family arrangements are made. As if on cue, my phone chimed with a text message. I had asked Jorge Ramirez to arrive at this moment. "And here's someone else who should be part of this conversation," I said. I walked to the entrance of the ballroom and opened the door. Jorge entered looking nervous but determined. His resemblance to Emma was subtle but unmistakable. The same shaped eyes, the same curve of the jaw. "This is Jorge Ramirez," I introduced him to the stunned gathering. "Emma's biological father." The room erupted in chaos. Cassandra pulled Michael aside, gesticulating wildly. Guests murmured among themselves, some even slipping out discreetly, unwilling to be part of such a dramatic scene. Michael's parents approached Jorge cautiously, examining his features as if searching for traces of the granddaughter they loved. Michael finally broke away from Cassandra and confronted me directly. "Why are you doing this?" he demanded, his voice cracking. "Why bring this up here now in front of everyone?" "Because you wouldn't listen in private," I replied simply. "Because you've been so wrapped up in your new life that you couldn't be bothered to hear about something that fundamentally affects our daughter. Yes, Michael, our daughter, regardless of DNA. Emma is still the child we raised together, the child who calls you daddy, the child who cries herself to sleep sometimes because you're not there to tuck her in." Jorge stepped forward. Then, his voice gentle but firm. "We're not here to cause problems. My wife and I have discussed this extensively with Adriana. We all agree that the most important thing is the well-being of both girls. We want to find a way forward that respects the bonds both children have formed with the parents who raised them, while also acknowledging biological realities." Michael stared at him, then back at me, then at the test results still clutched in his hand. For a moment, I glimpsed the man I had once loved, thoughtful, caring, concerned with doing the right thing. But then Cassandra laid a possessive hand on his arm, and his expression hardened again. "I need time to process this," he said stiffly, "and I'll need to get my own tests done to verify these results." "Of course," I agreed. "Take all the time you need. But remember, Emma doesn't have the luxury of putting her feelings on hold while you figure things out. She needs constancy and love now more than ever." As I turned to leave with Jorge, the engagement party in shambles behind us, I felt no triumph or satisfaction, only a profound sense of relief that the truth was finally out, and a quiet hope that maybe now we could all begin to heal. The aftermath of the engagement party revelation was as tumultuous as I had expected. Michael did indeed get his own DNA tests done, which only confirmed what I had already told him. Cassandra, faced with the sudden complication to her perfect new life, broke off the engagement within weeks. Apparently, she hadn't signed up for the kind of scandal that was now circulating through their social circles, nor for the complex family situation that would require ongoing contact with me and the Ramirez family. Michael's parents, to their credit, maintained their relationship with Emma. Elizabeth called me the day after the party, her voice thick with emotion. "I want you to know," she said firmly, "that Emma is still our granddaughter. 5 years of love doesn't disappear because of a DNA test." I was touched by her steadfastness. "She adores you and Richard," I assured her. "That will never change." In the months that followed, the Ramirez family became an unexpected blessing in our lives. Maria and I discovered we had much in common beyond our accidentally switched daughters. She was a kindergarten teacher at a school across town, sharing my passion for education. Jorge was a contractor whose warm, steady presence reminded me of my own father. We began with supervised playdates, watching as Emma and Sophia circled each other cautiously, at first, then gradually became friends. They shared the same birthday after all and found it hilarious that they had been switched as babies. At 5 years old, they were too young to fully comprehend the implications, treating it more like an exciting story than a life-altering revelation. As for the hospital, they eventually agreed to a substantial settlement for both families, after their internal investigation confirmed the mix-up during the power outage. The financial security this provided was a silver lining to an otherwise challenging situation. I was able to pay off our mortgage, now just my mortgage, and establish a college fund for Emma. The media caught wind of our story about 6 months after the engagement party. For a few weeks, we dealt with reporters calling and cameramen parked outside our homes. The hospital's PR team worked overtime to minimize the damage to their reputation. Eventually, the story faded from public interest, though occasionally someone would recognize us from the news coverage. Through all of this, Michael remained on the periphery. His initial shock and anger gave way to a strange detachment from the situation. He reduced his visits with Emma, claiming he needed time to adjust. When he did see her, the visits were short and awkward. Emma would return home confused and hurt, asking why Daddy seemed different. Then, about 8 months after our separation, Michael appeared at my doorstep, unannounced. He looked haggard, his designer clothes wrinkled dark circles under his eyes. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice hoarse. I let him in, curious about what had prompted this visit. We sat in the kitchen where we had once shared family breakfasts and dinner discussions about our days. "Cassandra left me," he said without preamble. "She's moved back to Chicago." I waited, suspecting there was more to this conversation than his romantic troubles. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he continued, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "About us, about Emma, about the choices I've made. I was wrong, Adriana, about so many things." "Michael," I began, but he held up a hand. "Please let me finish. I threw away 10 years of marriage for a relationship that meant nothing in the end. I abandoned my daughter because regardless of DNA, Emma is my daughter. I've been a selfish, short-sighted fool." He looked at me with pleading eyes. "I want to come home. I want us to be a family again. We can get through this hospital mix-up together, find a way to incorporate the Ramirez family into our lives. I still love you, Adriana. I never stopped, not really." A year ago, these words would have been everything I wanted to hear. 6 months ago, they might have still swayed me. But now, looking at the man who had so callously discarded our life together, who had only returned when his shiny new relationship collapsed, I felt nothing but a calm certainty. "No, Michael," I said gently. "There's no coming back from what happened. Not for us as a couple." His face crumpled. "Because of Cassandra, I'll never speak to her again, I promise. It was a mistake, a midlife crisis." "It's not about Cassandra," I interrupted. "It's about you and the choices you made. It's about the fact that when things got difficult, when our marriage required work and sacrifice, you chose to walk away rather than face those challenges together. That's not the kind of partnership I want anymore." "What about Emma?" he asked desperately. "She needs both her parents." "She does," I agreed. "And you will always be her father. That hasn't changed. But you'll need to rebuild your relationship with her on new terms. She's confused and hurt by your absence, Michael. She needs consistency and honesty, not a father who appears and disappears based on the state of his love life." Michael left that day with a defeated slump to his shoulders that might once have inspired my sympathy. But I had learned hard lessons about self-respect and boundaries, and I knew I had made the right decision for both Emma and myself. In the end, Michael moved to a different state, accepting a position at a prestigious hospital across the country. He claimed it was a career opportunity too good to pass up, but we all knew he was running from the mess he'd created, from the scandal that had tarnished his reputation in our medical community. He arranged video calls with Emma twice weekly and flew her out to visit during school breaks. It wasn't ideal, but it was stable, and Emma gradually adjusted to the new normal. Michael and I communicated primarily through emails and occasional texts, our interactions civil but distant. As for me, I found myself healing in ways I hadn't expected. The betrayal and heartbreak had forced me to rediscover my own strength and resilience. I had faced the collapse of my marriage, a shocking revelation about my child's paternity, and the public exposure of our private struggles, and I had survived it all. About a year after Michael moved away, I met David at a parent-teacher conference at Emma's school. He was a widower with a daughter in Emma's class, a kind man with gentle eyes and a quiet sense of humour. We started with coffee, then lunch, then dinner. He listened with genuine interest to the complicated story of my past, never judging or rushing me as I cautiously opened my heart again. David understood grief and loss in ways most people couldn't. He had lost his wife to cancer 3 years earlier and had been raising his daughter Sophie alone since then. Our children became friends, then best friends, creating their own little bond that paralleled the one growing between David and me. Unlike my whirlwind romance with Michael, my relationship with David unfolded slowly and deliberately. We discussed our expectations, our fears, our dreams for our daughters and ourselves. When he finally kissed me for the first time 6 months after we met, it felt like coming home to a place I'd never been before. 3 years have passed since that dramatic night at Michael's engagement party. Emma is now 8 years old, a vibrant, curious child who takes dance lessons and loves to read. She has adjusted remarkably well to our unique family situation, accepting with a child's practicality that she has 2 sets of parents who love her. The Ramirez family has become an integral part of our lives. We celebrate holidays together, coordinate birthdays for the girls, and consult each other on major parenting decisions. Sophia stays at our house 1 weekend each month, and Emma spends equivalent time with the Ramirezes. The girls have developed a special bond that transcends traditional sisterhood. They call themselves switch sisters and take delight in confusing people with their complicated origin story. Michael remains in Emma's life, though more as a distant father figure than a daily presence. He sends generous gifts, attends important events when he can, and takes her on lavish vacations. I've come to accept that this is the best he can offer, and I focus on ensuring Emma understands that his limitations are not a reflection of her worthiness of love. As for David and me, he proposed 6 months ago, offering not a diamond ring but a family medallion with 4 intertwined circles representing himself, me, Emma, and Sophie. We're planning a small wedding next spring, with both girls as flower girls and the Ramirez family in attendance. Michael has been invited as well, more for Emma's sake than anything else. The journey to this point has been anything but straightforward. There have been tears and anger, confusion and grief, but there has also been unexpected joy, new connections, and a deeper understanding of what family truly means. I've learned that parenthood is not defined by DNA, but by love, commitment, and daily presence. Emma may not share my genes, but she is unquestionably my daughter, the child I carried for 9 months, the baby I nursed through fevers and teething, the little girl whose hand I've held through kindergarten, jitters and bicycle tumbles. I've also learned about forgiveness, not for Michael's sake, but for my own peace of mind. Holding on to anger was like drinking poison and expecting someone else to suffer. Releasing that bitterness freed me to embrace the new life unfolding before me. Perhaps most importantly, I've discovered my own resilience. When Michael left me for His Mistress, I thought my world had ended. I could never have imagined the strength I would find within myself, or the unexpected blessings that would emerge from that painful chapter. Life rarely follows the script we write for it. Sometimes the plot twists are devastating, a betrayal, a shocking discovery, a loss of the future we had planned. But I've come to believe that these unexpected turns can lead us to where we truly belong, if only we have the courage to keep moving forward. As I look at Emma playing with Sophie in our backyard, at David preparing dinner in the kitchen that once felt so empty at the family we are creating, from the remnants of heartbreak and misfortune, I feel a profound sense of gratitude, not for what happened, but for what came after, for the beauty that can grow from even the most painful experiences if we allow it to take root. Have you ever experienced a betrayal that ultimately led to something better in your life? How did you find the strength to move forward? Share your story in the comments below. And if this tale of resilience resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might be struggling to see the light beyond their current darkness. Remember, sometimes the end of one chapter is just the beginning of a much better story. Thank you for listening, and I wish you healing and hope on your own journey.